Hello, everybody. I hope you're all well today. Welcome to our podcast, the Soundwaves of Media Podcast. My name is Ben, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Barbara.
Hello, everyone. Today we will be discussing everything to do with public relations. Later on, we will introduce our guest speaker, Amy Ahmed-Dolphin from Whistle PR, and further discuss the world of PR, as well as having a question and answer session.
So, what is PR? Public relations is an industry where organizations maintain the public image of a brand or a well-known person. PR can be broken down into many different types, such as crisis management PR. This is when a team needs to gather accurate facts and data to present to the public whenever a crisis occurs. For example, when a food company is called out for unsanitary practices.
There is also public affairs PR, which is used to create relationships with politicians or other key decision makers. Public affairs PR is usually very important during the run-up to an election.
Additionally, we have strategic communications PR. Strategic communications PR combines both marketing and advertising. And strategic communications also takes notes of who their targeted audience is and makes sure an organization reaches their specific objectives.
So now we should focus on the history of PR as well as the PR on a global scale. PR is an industry with a vast history, with instances of what could be considered as PR dating back to the ancient Greece and the 17th century Britain, with these forms of PR being used to create public opinion for issues such as abolishing the slave trade. Furthermore, a significant moment in the history of PR industry was the beginning of the digital age of the 21st century. According to the Pew Research Center, in 2018, 36% of people aged between 18 and 29 years old use social media as their most common source of news. Because of this, PR industry has had to adapt in order to, as companies needed to be able to maintain a reputation and promote themselves through this new online era. In addition, this period can be considered one of the most important in the history of PR, as the landscape of PR from traditional to the new media has been altered. Now, Ben will be focusing on the PR on a global scale.
Okay, so in terms of global scale, 8 of the 10 largest PR agencies are USA based, with 36,110 new PR jobs being created in the USA from 2012 to 2016. And the top 10 PR agencies list from 2019 saw agencies from 3 non-US based countries, France, China, and the UK. However, USA-based agencies still dominate every spot in the top 5. When looking at other areas such as the United Kingdom, statistics show there has been a growth in the number of PR professionals from 2011 to 2019. In addition, the global PR industry as a whole was reportedly responsible for generating a revenue of 16 billion in 2018 and is expected to grow to 93.07 billion at a compound annual growth rate of 9.9% through 2022. So, how can someone enter the world of PR? The first thing we should focus on is education. Thankfully, to enter the PR industry, there is not one set degree that will open doors, but many different degrees that are eligible. Although the best option might be just to get a degree in public relations itself, other appropriate degrees would be media and communications, journalism, English literature and language, as well as any business-related degrees.
However, aside from education, gaining experience from working in the industry as well as networking will open up many more opportunities for you, as well as allowing yourself to immerse in the world of PR and getting to understand the ins and outs of it before you dedicate yourself to the career as a full-time job.
Furthermore, the PR industry is a very demanding job. There is a lot to learn before entering the field and during your time in the field. I've come across a Forbes article online that mentions a few tips, with the first one mentioning that you should take time to research what type of PR you would like to work in. As I've mentioned earlier, there are many different types of PR, so it's important to do your research so that you can make sure to look out for the job that suits you the best. This article also mentions that you should never stop learning and that PR is an ever-changing field and there is no one-size-fits-all solution. The best way to learn is to gain experience, as we've mentioned, but to also read a lot.
Lastly, the most important tip would be to understand the media market. This is a tip you will need to have no matter what sector of PR you work in. It is important to become familiar with all media outlets and to stay on top of trends and general news.
So before we move on to our interview, allow us to introduce our guest speaker, Amy Ahmed-Dolphin.
Amy is an account director for Birmingham-based PR agency Whistle PR, a company which she has been for 6 years. Amy has been account director since April 2019.
Amy, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me, and hello, everybody.
It's it's a pleasure to have you here. So the first question is, what first got you into PR?
It's funny, I was just thinking about it as you were chatting through just then about, what you should think about getting into PR in terms of the different types that there are. And for me, I just didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went to university and I did something pretty generic. I did French with business studies because my dad said the business studies bit is probably a sensible thing to have at the end of it. So it was bracket with business studies. I did that in Swansea. And I don't remember coming out of that with a clear PR view, but I did do, I got involved with RAG at university. So I was their media officer and all the events were really great fun. And I loved Absolutely Fabulous. I don't know if any of you have watched that. So it's all about this really flamboyant, fantastic character played by Jennifer Saunders with Joanna Lumley as well. And they get drunk a lot and they have fabulous times and just behave very badly. But Adina runs a PR agency in London and it looked absolutely fabulous. I think I was a bit swayed by that. And so when I left university, I thought I probably would head to London. I grew up in Solihull in the Midlands. So I thought I'd probably head to London, go to the big city and get a job in PR, but that didn't happen. I went traveling and my path went a different way. And I didn't think about PR for quite some time. I ended up getting a job for a pub company and I worked in their accounts team. And it was quite a few years before I realised I was quite bored and I needed more jazz hands in my professional life. I just needed some fun and I was only at a desk at a computer. I wanted to be with people, I wanted to build relationships and I wanted to have, a creative outlet. And all I could figure is I loved writing. So I went to Warwick University, night school, and did a freelance, did a journalism certificate and started freelancing as a journalist for a local paper. And journalism really wasn't quite my thing. And then that's when I kind of fell back into PR. I forgot that I'd originally intended to go to London and do PR. So I ended up back there, but it took me about 10 years to get to that point.
What might you see in a typical day in PR? So like if you're you go into the office in the morning, what might you be expecting in a typical day?
Well, you've probably heard this response before. There is no typical day in PR. There is so much that could fall from the sky. It depends on your role. It depends on the level that you're working at. There's doing PR in-house and there's doing PR for an agency, and they're two very different things and very different pace of work, whether you're in-house or in an agency. Agency tends to be more fast-paced. You're working with a greater variety of things because you've got lots of different clients. So you have to be a jack of all trades and you have to adapt your writing style to all your different clients' brands. Whereas if you're in-house, you're just aligned to one brand probably, unless there's sub-brands, subdivisions within a company. But for example, I used to work in-house when I was at this pub company. I ended up working as a communications officer before I left. So I kind of worked towards a field that was better aligned to my talents. And, I might be managing the press desk. You never know what paper's going to ring through and ask some kind of contentious question. And that could just blow your day out the water if you had X, Y, Z planned. But generally, a good PR agency will have a plan. You know what you've been contracted to do for a particular client. At Whistle, for example, we'll have a 12-month plan, which will flex as things change and priorities adjust. But then, for that particular month, you've got to deliver certain things for a client. And I'm quite meticulous, so I know for a particular day I've got to do certain things. But you have to be flexible because issues and crises can fall from the sky.
We were mentioning crisis management earlier. I was going to say, with you talking about this plan that agencies often have, has there ever been any specific occasions where that plan you've come in one day and it's kind of gone out the window almost because of any events that have happened?
Well, your day-to-day plan can absolutely go out the window. You you can spend the day not getting to anything on your to-do list, and there might be very urgent things for your clients for that day, but you have to just sit down, take stock, replan, and think, right, what can the client, what can that client manage without today? How can I manage their expectations? I've got, this has fallen from the sky and I've got to do this today. So you just have to, delegate, speak to the team, see who can pick things up, and just, deal with what's in front of you.
So it seems there that prioritizing things is definitely a key skill. And speaking of sort of other skills and things like that, in your opinion, what does it take, both skills-wise and or in other factors, what does it take to be successful in your industry, would you say?
To be successful, well, adaptability, like I said, being flexible, definitely. Resilient, you are a little bit at the mercy of your clients, really, because again, if you're in-house, you've got one client in a way, you've got your line manager and maybe the CEO. In an agency, you've got every different client. You'll have someone that one client, you might have several touch points, several stakeholders within that company, and you've got to manage all of them. So you have to be quite resilient, because the pressure can be on, deadlines can drop and be moved around, and suddenly, the day, as you say, has changed. And then people are people, aren't they? You might get a difficult client. You might have a really lovely client who's had a terrible day and they take it out on you. So having a bit of, not taking things personally and just having a bit of thick skin and being resilient is key. Creativity is good, and it doesn't just mean to say, I'm not the best person when we're trying to come up with campaign ideas and things. I don't always feel like I maybe come up with the groundbreaking, award-winning campaign ideas, but I'm creative in other ways. There might be someone else in the team who comes up with those big ideas, and I might be creative in terms of finding a solution around something. But creativity, definitely, however you are creative, is helpful in this industry. And creativity can be honed. It's a skill that, if you don't feel you're very creative at the moment, there are tricks of the trade to kind of untap the workings of your mind and help you have a really good kind of brainstorming session. And I'd also say having like a considered approach. So not going ahead like a bull in a china shop, stopping and thinking about what you're doing. I think the key for me with communications, it's just logical thinking and considered thinking, just carefully thinking through how a campaign might run, how a crisis could unfold, how people might feel when they hear certain news, and how we might need to manage their expectations. So just having that kind of considered approach is quite helpful too.
So you spoke a little bit before about resilience and kind of issues that you might face on a day-to-day as well. Obviously, there's been one big issue that everyone in the country has faced for probably about 18 months now, and that is the coronavirus pandemic. So how would you say that lockdown and the pandemic have affected the PR industry?
Well, I think we've noticed quite a few things, really. We've noticed firstly, everyone was locked down and you couldn't get hold of anyone. So for someone who's working on a media relations program, suddenly desks were unmanned, switchboards at different magazines you might be trying to phone were just ringing out. And journalists didn't tend to give out mobile numbers. You'd only ever have a landline or a switchboard. You couldn't get hold of anyone. And then there were mass furloughs across the media. So that was really challenging, and everyone started to adapt now, and things are moving on. But then there's been good things that have come out of it. One of my favourite things to come out of it is virtual desk side briefings. So a desk side briefing, in case you're not aware, is where you might go down to London or to a publishing house in the counties and get maybe half an hour, 20 minutes in the diary with the relevant editor at the Times or at the Express or at Good Housekeeping magazine, just to say, right, this is what's happening with my clients. here's some angles I really want to pitch to you. What are you working on? What can we help you with? How can we work better with you? And you've got like 20 minutes to kind of chat to them or something. And it's really nice going and doing those things. But of course, you couldn't with lockdown. And some of the kind of media databases and media monitoring services that we use in PR have taken the forethought to go and organise these virtual sessions where they'll have like we've got a lot of property editors, so some of the top property editors from the nationals would do a meeting like this where they get interviewed by one person about what you're looking for from PRs at the moment, what's the worst thing a PR could do, what if we're going to talk about these sorts of like sustainable homes, what can we talk about there? And that's just been great to have that FaceTime, although they can't see us, we can still ask questions, but to have that FaceTime has been brilliant coming out of the pandemic.
And with sort of virtual conferences as well, and virtual desk side sort of being able to talk to people that aren't physically there with you, do you think there'll be more options to work from home post-COVID with services such as Zoom or Microsoft Teams?
Well, I think, yeah, we definitely embraced new ways of working, and people who hadn't been maybe quite so keen to get online before have done. So like we've always been quite reliant on face-to-face client meetings, for example. And then if you think about your time out on the road traveling to those, it's a lot of wasted time. If you're driving, if you're on a train, you can still work, but it is a lot of lost hours if you're traveling to meetings. And I will always advocate, you know, seeing people face to face, because I am a people person, and I think it is really where you make that connection. But my goodness, the time we've saved by having virtual meetings with clients has been great. We've learned that you can do everything PR wise from home. There's been no issues really, but we have popped into the office when we've had to do something like a mailer. If we're doing like a media mailer for a client, and we just need to get to the franking machine or something. And we've been doing some new biz pitches. And we've mostly done that virtually, but there have been occasions where there's nothing that compares to getting yourselves together in a space face to face and working through a pitch proposal. So yeah, I think I'm lucky. I work for Whistle, and the MD of Whistle has always been very amenable and very flexible, and I've always been able to work from home once a week or something. But you know, some agencies do not, you know, promote that at all. And through the pandemic, I know other agencies in the Midlands, I've heard it's been the first time they've ever let their people work from home. And I don't really see why there should be any reason not to offer that flexibility to your team. So yeah, I think we will always have an office at Whistle, because we do like the office environment. We like seeing each other, and we like the people that we work with. And you get such, you know, there's great collaboration that you get and support from your team members, but it can be done remotely as well.
Okay, so what would you say as well is the most challenging aspect of your job or your career as a whole that you've faced so far?
So personally for me, I'm a perfectionist. So I said already, I'm quite meticulous. I'm a perfectionist. I get stressed, and PR is quite a demanding arena to work in. I'm very obliging. I'll say yes to things. And basically that has resulted in a burnout for me. I have been stressed to the point where I haven't been able to come into work. Not at Whistle, it was somewhere else. And then what that's meant for me is I've been very picky about where I work. Culture is really important. And I noted down when you were saying at the beginning to research like the type of PR you want to go into, and that's absolutely right. But it made me think that when I was applying for my current position here, you get to, when you go interviewing for agencies, you'll be able to research and see who their clients are, and it might sway you, but it shouldn't be your ultimate decision, because clients do come and go, don't forget, and the culture is what stays, and it's the people that you work with, and the people come and go as well, but the culture is the most important thing. So you know, you need to have the right culture that suits you. You might not be this type of person, it might not be applicable to you, but you've got a good team, good line manager, and a good MD. That's helped me manage that particular thing for me. PR is all about plate spinning. That's what we say. You've got to spin lots of plates because there's loads of things going on at the same time. Your head can get really busy with it. I have to document everything in trackers and spreadsheets because I have to list it, because I won't forget. I won't remember anything. So for me, it's, I say fire prevention rather than firefighting. I have to look for the warning signs. I know when I'm getting overwhelmed, when I can't see the wood for the trees, and I speak up and I delegate and I share with people and I'm open and I talk about it. And mental health is something that, you know, is talked about more and more, which is brilliant. And when I first had a burnout, I didn't want anyone to know about it because I felt I was such a failure. And I don't feel like that now. I will always tell people if I'm struggling because it's not a failure. So that's the most challenging. PR is very fast paced. It is very demanding. That's why you need to be resilient, but you need to be able to share and speak to people and ask for help when you need it.
So, of course, there's skills like resilience and being able to communicate in the culture of your sort of workplace environment. However, when interviewing people and when looking at new candidates for a role, what characteristics and qualities would you be looking for someone to stand out and to be able to identify someone as the best candidate, which would be most suitable for a job within PR?
Well, I don't think everyone needs to be the same. It's like with the creative thing, like people are creative in different ways. And I think in a business, ideally, you should have, you know, people have got different attributes and strengths and qualities that all come together to work together. So you might have someone who's decisive, you might have someone who's creative, you might have someone who powers through works like, you know, like a steam train, but you might have someone like me who's more careful and considered and likes to take their time with things. So I don't think there's like a one size fits all, but for me personally, I like enthusiasm. I like someone who's up for it and up for trying new things. And you know, with PR, you could end up working on you wouldn't imagine the topics you'd find interesting when you come to write a 1,500 word thought leadership feature on the most like specific thing about an engineering component, and you'd never think you'd find it so fascinating. But you've got to, you know, flex to all these things, and you might end up on a client that you think, oh, it's not really my cup of tea, but you need to be up for it, and you need to you find the joy for yourself in it, so that you enjoy your daily work. I also like empathy, so I like someone who's a bit emotionally intelligent and can, you know, offer to help when it's not necessarily their client. Someone who's just seeing the bigger picture and not got a blinkered approach, and you know, they're seeing what's going on with other people and working as a team member, not just in a silo. And communicative, and it sounds really obvious, but there are some poor communicators in the PR industry. So communicative is definitely a tick in my box as well.
How has your experience within Whistle PR changed your perspective on the industry as a whole?
I don't know. It's certainly, this isn't Whistle specifically, just generally in PR, it's not all absolutely fabulous for those who are familiar with the show. It's not all, you know, fabulous darling. It is fast paced, it is hard working. And I think probably the biggest thing that's the revelation since going into PR is just that client service aspect. So that how said that you are at their mercy, you can be at their beck and call. And if you don't like that sort of thing, then probably in-house is better for you. And just, I suppose where I am now, it's just always looking for new business opportunities and trying to network, always looking forward. Within Whistle, I work on clients and I have kind of a new business function as well. So I'm always trying to seek out new business opportunities. But I'm not sure. I think probably the only misconception I had about PR in general, which has changed over the years, is just that, well, I think you said it before yourself at the start, it's just ever changing. You think you just get up to speed and learn the latest thing, and you've always got to be looking further forward, especially if you want to stand out from other agencies. You've got to be looking much further forward, what's coming around the bend, what are the new trends, and just keeping abreast of everything. Especially with digital, it changes quicker than you can blink your eye.
Speaking of unexpected things and changes, how do you deal with unexpected challenges to make the rest of the campaign run as smoothly as possible?
It's just about staying calm, really, and you just stop and take stock and confer with other people. It's always better to have two heads rather than one, or a few heads. It's always good to have a sounding board and run things past other people, even if it's a different client team. Just like, we've encountered this hurdle with this campaign. Oh my God, it's going to destroy the whole campaign. Just give it a bit of space, ask for another person's view, and work out a solution. And kind of all the meanwhile, just managing client expectations if necessary, or managing the MD's expectations if we're about to end up with egg on our face for some reason. But I think one kind of little mantra at Whistle we have is, it'll be fine. That's what one of our directors always says, it'll be fine, because it always is. And something we also say, I think it's like a general PR thing, is it's not ER, it's PR. It's not brain surgery, it's public relations. And you put huge pressure on yourself to do a good job for your clients, but you do have to remind yourself sometimes, at the end of the day, no one's going to die. It's a communications campaign we're rolling out, and of course a company's reputation is very important, it's their investment, but you do need to just give yourself that bit of perspective sometimes, and it'll be fine.
So looking at clients as well, obviously you've got to know what your client wants, and you've got to make the product that the client is sort of hoping that you will. But what other attributes would you use, or do you believe would work to help you stand out from the market and to persuade a client to choose your service compared to somebody else's?
So, I mean, we focus our offering on around a company's reputation, and saying that is, a brand's reputation is their strongest asset. And then we talk about developing strategic communication strategies that are aligned to a business's objectives. And you literally said this word for word in your intro. It made me smile, because that's exactly what we say whenever we go into a creds meeting for a new business prospect or lead. And we have a holistic integrated approach. So PR, traditional PR, and digital and online and social media, it's all combined. It works together, and we have a planned approach with effective delivery, and we set KPIs and we measure it and adjust it. So I think that's really how we say that we stand out. It's just having that real strategic approach. And again, the people, I mean, I've said there's a reason I work at Whistle, and it's because of the culture, and it's because of the people that work there. We carefully recruit. And so it means that we do have particular people working for us, and we like to think that we're nice people, and we like to think that our clients enjoy having us as part of their extended teams. So that's another thing as well.
So I spoke a little bit in the introduction about how the PR industry is predicted to change in the future in terms of numbers, but being in the industry yourself, how do you think we might see the industry changing?
The media landscape is always changing, all the time. So we're looking at this at the moment for some new business proposals we're doing, and we've kind of unearthed some stats which are talking about trusting companies increasing. So there's something called the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is quite interesting to look at. Edelman, if you're not clear, is a communications firm, and they developed this trust barometer 20 years ago, and they do it every year, I think. And they're showing that businesses are becoming more and more trusted, even above government and media. So brands have to be, transparent, open, approachable, clear with their communications, and more accountable. And it's the whole thing with sustainability. People expect more from brands to behave in responsible ways. So brands are having to, the option for like branded content that you can put out on a blog page or on the website and social media. You need to think very carefully about the messages that brands are putting out there. So it's, in terms of PRs, it's recognizing that and taking brands on that journey to help them with their reputation. And in terms of the media landscape, it's just, there's more channels to target. There's just so much out there now digitally. It's just exploding off the chart. And like traditional press, obviously, is on the decline. The print publications are on the decline. We had really nice home interest magazine, kitchens, bedrooms and bathrooms, that folded during lockdown, which was really sad. And there was like a few regional lifestyle publications that folded as well. I went on maternity leave in 2017. Gosh, I can't believe it's that long ago. I couldn't believe when I came back and updated looked at my media list for particular clients and how they changed and how many weren't there anymore. You know, so it's really sad, but it is kind of, you know, how it is. I got an interesting stat that in 2019, we went down from 17,000 to 6,000 journalists in the UK. I mean, that's just staggering. And I saw that reported in a national paper. It just kind of shows how the media landscape is changing. But it's exciting, you know, people like the Daily Mail are using Snapchat as one of their channels. There's more hyper-local news outlets and like your Nextdoor app and things like that. And all these are ways that you can consider to get your clients' messages out there. And of course, like influencers, IGC and UGC, so all the user-generated content and influencer, you know, generated content. There's so much at your disposal to get a message out there. So that's exciting.
Lastly, I would like to discuss something that stuck out to me whilst I was browsing to Whistle PR website. I've noticed that your leadership team consists of all women. Is this something that came out naturally, or it was always the intention to have like a woman-led business?
Well, the MD, lady called Sarah Kent, set up the company. So she's worked in PR for many years and wanted to set up her own company. And no, not at all. We've got one man within our team at the moment. And I think you will be able to find statistics on this, but there are generally more women in PR. So it's not, you know, obviously we recruit responsibly, and we would like to have a broader mix. And we've usually always had a token male within the team. It's changed over the years. There was one when I started, and there's been one that's come and gone, and there's another one now. But yeah, we just always have more female applicants.
Okay, so it's just like more naturally than like an intention. So to wrap up everything up with, PR is a very broad industry with many different sectors. There are many different paths that you can take to land yourself a role in the PR industry, but the most important step along your way is to gain a lot of experience. Thank you for answering our questions today, Amy. As mentioned before, we have a question and answer session now, so we have a few audience questions for you to answer.
Okay, so we've got one from Zara, which is, what are the best ways to attract the audience attention from the PR industry?
This is why we talk about strategic campaigns and strategic communication strategies. So we would always look at what's the message and who are we trying to reach? And then we will look at what are the best channels to reach those people. So there's no point looking at retired people who are looking to downsize in a home, for example, and then targeting mostly Instagram, because they're probably on Facebook, or they're probably reading like the local lifestyle magazine or something like that. So, you know, there are so many ways. And I think also, I don't know if you've talked much in your course about organic PR and kind of paid as well. So we know that there's advertising, and that's different, but we talk a lot now about paying to play, and you can do so much organically, but you all, you know, sponsored content, influencer partnerships, there is more and more a requirement for businesses to pay to play to get their message out there. But yeah, which channel completely depends on the type of audience. Does that answer the question, Zara?
We've got a question from Yanis as well, which is, what are some common mistakes among, he refers to them as rookies, but I suppose new people in PR?
Okay, thank you, Yanis. So I guess maybe with writing, you have to write a lot in PR, and you have to adapt your tone to different clients, and you have to, within even one client's remit of work, you have to adapt according to whether you're writing a press release or a blog or a feature or a letter to their customers. So I guess it's just, let's say it's a rookie mistake, but maybe some people just barge through into a press release and don't really think about what is the story, who are you trying to reach, what are you trying to say, instead of just thinking blindly with the who, when, or, you know, what, when, why. Think about the story that you're crafting for the particular purpose of that piece of content. Oh, I can't think of anything else, but do you know what? I will think about it, and I'll send some other tips through after the session.
Oh, brilliant. We've got one from Omar as well, which is, what factors do you weigh up before picking up or dropping a client?
I dropped a client. What factors? Okay. Well, I mean, as I'm very heavily involved in new business, so I mean, I'm involved at the very start of trying to suss out the leads and network and cold call, which is not everyone's cup of tea, and not something that you'd be going into an agency from scratch. But I'm looking for, are they a sector that's in growth first and foremost? So, you know, are they a business that's going to flourish and we can grow with them as their business grows? That's the sort of thing we might be looking for. I guess things that might be putting us off if we've gone partway through a pitch process is if you start to get indications that a client might turn out to be incredibly demanding or unreasonable, or have unreasonable expectations of what we can achieve. I remember going on a pitch with a charity which wanted us to have delivered something like 15 pieces of national coverage before the first week of May, and we were looking at the pitch process at the end of March, and it was like, well, that's just ludicrous. I mean, that's not even having a proper conversation about it. And actually, we did decide not to proceed with the pitch because we just thought their expectations were unrealistic, and we were never going to be able to do the job for them that they unrealistically wanted. Dropping a client? That's a bit of a contentious question. I have to be careful what I could say. I might decline to comment.
That's all right. You can do that. That's fine.
But, you know, what I will say though is, you know, I've said it before during the past few minutes, but you are at the mercy of clients. You know, they are your God, and you have to answer to them and do a good job for them. Other people might have a different view on client service, but I like to do a damn good job for my clients. And yeah, they can really annoy you sometimes. They can. But, you know, you have to not take it personally.
Speaking of this, have there ever been any times with clients, you don't have to say specifics, you know, so don't have to go into any details, but have there ever been, obviously, involvement from the client is paramount to the success, but have there ever been any times where clients have got almost too involved, would you say?
Yeah, and it's difficult. You get clients where you want them to be more involved, and you're trying to give them, you know, that there's a great opportunity for their company, and you know you can help their business, you know you can help them deliver more growth or something, and we say that, like, you're only as good as your opposite number within your client. You might get appointed by a senior team, but then you've got an opposite number, and if they're not buying into it, or they don't get it, or they're too busy and they never come back to you, it does really hinder what you can do, and that can be frustrating when you know you can do so much for them. Equally, there are people that they're micromanager sort of people who get too involved, and it would be best if they just left you to do what you're paid to do, because, you know, we run an ethical company, we do a good job for people, we pride ourselves in that, and we're going to run a good account for them. You know, we just need to be empowered to do that, and we like to work as an extension of their team, so they see us that way. So it can go either way, to be honest.
Okay, thank you very much. So I think that's a good point to end today's episode. So once again, thank you, Amy, for joining us. I'll be sure to leave a link. I'll be sure to leave a link to Whistle PR's website in the description, depending on how people are listening to this podcast. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and we hope to see you next time. Goodbye.